humanity returned the debt, and the universe was never the same. Part 1. The Forgotten Gift. The stars had always been cold and distant, but for Admiral Park they held memories. He stood at the great window of his flagship, the Remembrance, watching the endless darkness stretch before him. Somewhere out there, 300 years ago, a dying species had reached across the void to save his ancestors. Now he wondered if anyone remembered why. The story was taught in every school. Children learned it before they learned to count. In the year 2547, Earth's sun had begun to die. Scientists had predicted they had 50 years. They were wrong. The sun collapsed in 8 billion people faced extinction, crowded onto a planet that was growing colder by the day. Then the came. They appeared without warning, ships made of light and crystal, beautiful beyond human understanding. They spoke in voices like music, and they offered something no one expected: salvation. They asked for nothing in return. They simply opened their ships and said, "Come." For 3 years, they carried humanity across the stars. They found a new world, green and warm, with a yellow sun that would burn for billions of years. They gave humans the secrets of faster-than-light travel. They shared their knowledge of medicine, agriculture, and energy. And when the last human child was safe on new soil, they smiled their strange, luminous smiles and said goodbye. "Remember kindness," their leader had said, "pass it forward." Then they vanished into the deep black, returning to their home in a galaxy far away, and humanity never saw them again. Had grown up with this story. His grandmother used to tell it to him at bedtime, her voice soft with wonder. She had been born on the new Earth, the first generation of the saved. She remembered the gratitude that filled every heart, the promises people made to honor those who had rescued them. But 300 years was a long time. People forgot. They built cities and fought wars and spread across 12 star systems. They became legend, then myth, then just a story for children. Some people even doubted they had existed at all. Not, he had named his ship after them. He had dedicated his life to the stars, searching for any sign of the beings who had given humanity a second chance. And now, finally, he had found something. Captain stood beside him, her face pale in the dim light of the bridge. She was young, barely 40, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She had been his second in command for 5 years, and he trusted her more than anyone in the fleet. "The signal is definitely," she said. "I ran it through every database we have. The encryption matches perfectly." Did not look away from the window. Play it again. Pressed a button, and the message filled the bridge. It was not in any human language, but the translation scrolled across the screen in simple words. "We who saved you now face oblivion. Remember us." The bridge crew sat in silence. Some of them had never heard the language before. It was haunting, like wind through crystal caves, like light given voice. Even the translation felt heavy with sorrow. "Where is it coming from?" asked. Hesitated. "Andromeda." Finally turned to look at her. "The galaxy." "Yes, sir, 2.5 million light-years away." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The farthest humans had ever traveled was 8,000 light-years. Andromeda might as well have been on the other side of existence. "Can we reach them?" asked. Shook her head slowly. "Not with any technology we have. The journey would take, I do not even know, centuries. By the time we arrived, whatever is happening to them would be long over." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window. "Bring this to the council. I want every representative there within the week." The council chamber was the largest room on the human. It had been built to hold the leaders of all 12 star systems, and today, every seat was filled. Holographic projections flickered as distant representatives joined from across human space. Stood at the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon him. He had spent his entire career preparing for battles, for negotiations, for the hard choices of command. But this was different. This was not about strategy or politics. This was about the soul of humanity itself. He played the message. He let the words fill the chamber, let the representatives hear the sadness and desperation in that ancient voice. Then he told them what he wanted to do. The response was immediate and divided. "This is madness," said representative from the outer colonies. "We cannot reach them. Even if we could, what would we do? We know nothing about what threatens them." "The debt was paid long ago," another voice called out. "We have honored their memory for 3 centuries. We have built monuments and told stories. What more can be asked of us?" "They are probably already dead," someone muttered. "The signal took over 2 million years to reach us. Whatever crisis they faced ended before humans even discovered fire." Listen to all of it. He let them speak their fears and doubts, and when the chamber finally fell silent, he stepped forward. "You are all correct," he said. "The distance is impossible. The mission is suicide. The may already be dust. And yes, we have honored them in words and monuments for 300 years. He paused, looking around the chamber. "But words and monuments are not why they saved us." The silence deepened. They did not rescue humanity because we could repay them. They did not ask for gratitude or promises. They saved us because we were dying and they could help. That is all. They saw a species in need and they answered. His voice grew stronger. "For 3 centuries we have told ourselves we are grateful. We have taught our children that kindness matters, that debts must be honored. But now, for the first time, we have a chance to prove it. Not with words, not with monuments, with action." He pointed toward the ceiling, toward the stars beyond. "Out there, the beings who gave us everything are calling for help. They are not asking us to save them. They are just asking us to remember. But I say that is not enough. I say we do not just remember kindness. We return it." Representatives stood up. "And if we cannot reach them, if we sacrifice everything and fail?" Met his eyes. "Then we fail trying. And the universe will know that when humanity was tested, we did not look away. We did not make excuses. We crossed the impossible distance because someone who once saved us needed saving." The chamber erupted in argument. Voices rose and fell. Representatives shouted at each other across the room. But watching from the gallery above saw something changing. She saw the doubt in some eyes turning to something else. Shame, perhaps, or hope. The vote took 3 days. It was the closest in human history. But in the end, humanity chose to answer. Stood on the bridge of the remembrance as the news spread across 12 star systems. He watched the chaos of preparation begin, ships being recalled, scientists summoned, resources gathered. Joined him at the window. "We do not even know how to get there," she said quietly. Nodded. "No, we do not, but we will find a way." "How can you be so sure?" He smiled just slightly. "Because this is what we are. When someone saves us, we do not forget, and when they need us, we come, no matter the cost, no matter the distance." He looked out at the stars. "We owe them everything, and humanity always pays its debts." The first ships began to move. Across human space, a species that had been saved prepared to become the saviors. The journey to Andromeda had begun. Humanity returned the debt, and the universe was never the same. Part 2: The Long Journey. The problem was simple to understand and impossible to solve. Andromeda was 2.5 million light-years away. The fastest human ships could travel 1,000 light-years in a single jump. Even if they jumped continuously, never stopping, never resting, the journey would take thousands of years. By the time they arrived, generations would have lived and died aboard the ships. The crew who launched would never see the destination. Their great-great might not see it either. Doctor had not slept in 4 days. She stood in her laboratory on the science station orbiting New Earth, surrounded by floating equations and holographic star maps. Her hair was tangled, her eyes red with exhaustion, but her mind was burning with possibility. She was humanity's greatest physicist. She had built the jump gates that connected the 12 star systems. She understood faster-than-light travel better than anyone alive, and she knew that everything humanity had built was not enough. But there was another way. She called Admiral on a secure channel. When his face appeared on her screen, she could see the same exhaustion in his eyes. Neither of them had rested since the Council's decision. "I have an idea," she said. "It is dangerous, it might not work, and it will cost more than anything humanity has ever attempted." Leaned forward, "Tell me." Took a breath. "The jump gates work by folding space between 2 points. Each gate can reach about 1,000 light years. But what if we connected them together? What if we built a chain, a bridge from one gate to the next, all the way across the void?" "How many gates would we need?" "All of them." The silence stretched between them. "Every gate in human space," continued. "Every single one. We would have to link them together in a sequence, each one powering the next. The energy required would be, I cannot even calculate it fully. Every colony would have to sacrifice their power reserves. People would go dark for months. No heating, no transportation, no hospitals. Billions of people would suffer." His face was unreadable. "And if it works?" "If it works, we could create a temporary tunnel through space. A bridge that stretches from the Milky Way to Andromeda. Ships could cross in days instead of." "Temporary." Nodded. "The gates were not designed for this. The strain would destroy them one by one as we pass through. Once we cross, the bridge collapses behind us. There would be no coming back the same way. We would have to rebuild everything from nothing on the other side." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "How long to prepare?" 6 months, maybe less if every colony cooperates." "They will cooperate," said. "I will make sure of it." But cooperation did not come easily. When the plan was announced, protests erupted on 7 worlds. People who had voted for the mission suddenly realized what it would cost them personally. Months of darkness meant frozen homes and failed crops. It meant hospitals running on emergency power, choosing who would live and who would die. It meant children crying in the cold while their parents wondered if the sacrifice was worth it. On the colony world of Haven, a riot broke out in the capital city. Lieutenant Minu watched from the roof of the military headquarters as crowds filled the streets below. They carried signs that read, "Our children first," and "Let the dead stay dead." He understood their fear. He felt it himself. Minu was 28 years old, a pilot for the United Human Fleet. He had joined the military to escape his family's legacy of failure, a father who had abandoned them, a mother who had died in poverty, a brother who had disappeared into the criminal underworlds of the outer colonies. He had sworn to make something of himself, to prove that the name could mean something good. Now he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Sergeant found him on the rooftop, staring at the chaos below. She was his navigator, assigned to his scout ship for the past 2 years. She was sharp-tongued and cynical, the kind of soldier who believed in nothing but survival. "They are scared," she said, joining him at the edge. "So am I," Minu admitted. "Good, fear keeps you alive." She lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the night air. "You really think we can cross 2 million light years?" "Doctor says the math works." "Math does not care about reality. Reality has a way of killing people who trust math too much." Minu almost smiled. "Why did you volunteer then?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she shrugged. "I do not know. Maybe I got tired of only believing in survival. Maybe I wanted to believe in something bigger just once." She flicked ash into the wind. "Or maybe I am just stupid." Below them, the riots continued. But something else was happening too. Minu watched as a group of ordinary citizens, factory workers, shopkeepers, teachers, pushed through the crowd carrying boxes of supplies. They were not protesting. They were volunteering. Word had spread of a family on the edge of the city who had already given up their power rations, choosing to freeze so that the mission could proceed. Their neighbors, shamed by the sacrifice, had done the same, and then their neighbors, and then entire streets. It spread like fire. People who had been screaming about their children suddenly found themselves standing beside parents who had given everything. Workers who had complained about the cold saw elderly couples donating their last reserves. A movement was born. They called themselves the Remembered, after the who had never asked for anything in return. They wore simple gray bands on their wrists and carried a single message. They crossed the stars for us. We cross galaxies for them. Within weeks, the protests faded. Across 12 star systems, humanity began to sacrifice together. Me and you were selected for the advanced scout team, the first humans who would cross the bridge and enter Andromeda. Their ship was called the Pathfinder, a small, fast vessel designed for reconnaissance. They would go ahead of the main fleet, find the source of the signal, and report back. If there was anything left to find. The launch day came faster than anyone expected. Minyu stood in the hangar of the Remembrance, looking at his tiny ship surrounded by giants. The main fleet stretched behind him, 300 warships, 50 supply vessels, 20 hospital ships, everything humanity could spare. Admiral came to see them off personally. He shook Minyu's hand with a grip that was firm but kind. "You understand what you are doing," said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. Once you cross, the gates behind you will collapse. You will be alone in Andromeda until the main fleet catches up. That could take days or weeks, depending on how the bridge holds." "I understand." Looked at him for a long moment. "You are young. You have your whole life ahead of you. No one would blame you for staying behind." Minyu thought of his father, who had run away from every hard choice. He thought of his mother, who had stayed and fought until the end. He thought of the who had crossed impossible distances to save strangers. "With respect, sir," he said, "I would blame me." Smiled. It was a sad smile, but proud. "Then go find them. Tell them we are coming." Minyu climbed into the Pathfinder, was already at her station, running final checks on the navigation systems. She looked up as he sealed the hatch. "Ready?" she asked. "No." "Good, means you are thinking clearly." The engines hummed to life. Around them, the great fleet began to move toward the first gate. Across human space, the lights went dark as power flowed into the bridge. Billions of people sat in the cold and the darkness, waiting. The first gate activated, then the second, then the third. Minyu watched through the viewport as space itself seemed to tear open, a tunnel of impossible light stretching before them. "Here we go," murmured. The Pathfinder shot forward into the light. Behind them, the gate exploded. There was no going back. They fell through the tunnel for what felt like hours, though the instruments said it was only minutes. Space twisted around them. Stars blurred into lines of light. Minyu gripped his controls and focused on breathing. Then suddenly, they were through. The tunnel spat them out into darkness. Minyu blinked, his eyes adjusting, and then he gasped. Before them hung a spiral of light, a galaxy, vast and beautiful and utterly alien. They had crossed 2.5 million light years. They were in Andromeda. Stared at the viewport in silence. Then very quietly she said, "We actually made it." Minyu checked the instruments. The next section of the bridge was forming behind them as more gates connected. The main fleet would follow in hours. But for now, they were alone. Two humans in an unknown galaxy, searching for beings who had saved their ancestors 3 centuries ago. "Well," Minyu said, turning the ship toward the distant signal, "let us go find out if this was worth it." The Pathfinder flew forward into the unknown. And behind them, the universe began to change. Humanity returned the debt, and the universe was never the same. Part 3: What they found. There was cold and it was dying. Minyu saw it first through the long-range sensors, a planet wrapped in shadow, its once bright surface now dim and cold. As the Pathfinder drew closer, he understood why. Something was feeding on it. Something dark and hungry that moved through space like smoke through water. "What is that?" whispered, staring at the viewport. The darkness was alive. It stretched across the stars in tendrils of absolute black, swallowing light wherever it touched. Ships floated dead in its wake, vessels, their crystal hulls cracked and empty. Orbital stations tumbled through the void, their lights extinguished forever. And at the center of it all, the thing waited. It had no shape that made sense, no form that the human eye could understand. It simply was a void given hunger, an emptiness that consumed. "The hollow," Minu said, reading the data that streamed across his screens. "That is what they call themselves, or what they call them. The translation is not perfect." Pulled up the intercepted communications they had gathered on their approach. They had been fighting the hollow for 10,000 years. Across that time, 100 civilizations had fallen to the darkness. They were the last. "They have been dying for," said quietly, "and we only just heard about it now." Minu thought about the signal that had crossed 2 million light-years to reach humanity. It had been sent when the first pyramids were being built on Earth. The beings who sent it were long dead, but their descendants were still here, still fighting, still hoping that someone would remember. "We need to get closer," Minu said. "Find survivors, let them know we are here." Grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? That thing out there, it destroyed 100 civilizations. What are we supposed to do against that?" "I do not know yet, but I know we did not cross galaxies to watch from a safe distance." He pushed the engines forward. The Pathfinder dove toward the shadowed planet. They found the survivors in a city beneath the surface, the last stronghold of the people. The city was built into a massive cavern of crystal, its spires reaching toward an artificial sky that glowed with soft, fatting light. Once, it must have been beautiful beyond words. Now, it felt like a tomb. The who greeted them were nothing like the legends. The stories described beings of light, powerful and eternal, but these creatures were dim. Their luminescent bodies flickered like dying candles. Their movements were slow, exhausted. They had been fighting for so long that they had forgotten what peace felt like. Elder was their leader. She was ancient even by standards, so old that she remembered the decision to save humanity 3 centuries ago. Her light was the among her people, but even she was fading. She received Minu, and in a chamber of mirrors, where reflections of their tired forms stretched into infinity. "Humans," she said, and her voice was like wind through hollow bones. "We did not think you would come." "You sent a message," Minu said. "You asked us to remember." "We asked you to remember," agreed. "We did not ask you to die for us." "Nobody asked us anything," replied. "We chose to come." Studied them with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "You have grown," she said softly. "When we found you, you were children fighting among yourselves, barely able to reach your own moon, and now you have crossed the void between galaxies." "We had good teachers," Minu said. Light flickered, a smile perhaps, or a sob. "We gave you technology and knowledge, but this stubborn courage, this was always yours. We did not teach you to be brave." She turned away, her form drifting toward the great window that overlooked the underground city. "But bravery cannot defeat the hollow. We have tried everything. Weapons, shields, diplomacy. They do not want our surrender. They do not want our resources. They want only to consume. They feed on life energy, the force that makes living things alive. And we are made of life energy. We are their perfect prey." Minu stepped forward. "Tell me about them, everything you know." Told them. The hollow had appeared from the space between galaxies, from the great emptiness where no stars shone. Perhaps they had evolved there in the absolute darkness. Perhaps they had been created by some ancient power beyond comprehension. No one knew. What was known was their hunger. They consumed life energy the way fire consumed wood. Every living thing they touched withered and died, its essence pulled into the darkness. They had spent billions of years moving from galaxy to galaxy, leaving only silence in their wake. They had fought them longer than any other species. Their mastery of light and energy made them difficult prey, but even the light could not hold back the darkness forever. "How many of you are left?" asked. Light dimmed further. 12 million. Once we numbered in the trillions. 12 million. The population of a single human city. That was all that remained of a civilization that had crossed the universe. "Your fleet," Minyu said. "How large?" "We have no fleet. Our last warships were destroyed a century ago. We have only shields now, barriers of light that keep the hollow at bay, but they are weakening. In days, perhaps weeks, they will fall. And then—" She did not need to finish. Minyu thought of Admiral, somewhere in the bridge tunnel between galaxies, leading 300 warships toward this dying world. He thought of Doctor, who had sacrificed her life's work to make the crossing possible. He thought of the billions of humans who had sat in darkness and cold so that this mission could proceed. They had come so far, they could not fail now. "A fleet is coming," he said. 300 warships, the most powerful humanity has ever built. Turned to look at him. 300 ships against a billion hollow, against an entity that has devoured 100 civilizations. "Yes, you will be destroyed." "Maybe," Minyu admitted, "but we came anyway." For a long moment was silent. Then her light flickered again, that strange gesture that might have been a smile. "You truly are remarkable creatures," she said. "When we saved you, we thought we were preserving a young species with potential. We did not know we were saving warriors." "We do not think of ourselves as warriors," said. "No, then what do you think you are?" Considered the question. She thought of the who had become volunteers. She thought of the families who had frozen in the dark so that ships could fly. She thought of herself, a woman who had never believed in anything, crossing galaxies for strangers. "I think," she said slowly, "we are people who remember, and people who pay back what we owe." Light brightened just slightly. Then perhaps there is hope after all. In orbit above the dying world, the Hollow sensed something new. After 10,000 years of fighting the same enemy, something different had arrived. Small vessels, quick and strange, broadcasting signals in an unfamiliar language. The Hollow did not feel curiosity. They did not feel fear. They felt only hunger. But for the first time they also felt something else. The life energy of these new creatures was different. It burned hotter than it tasted of something the Hollow had never encountered before. It tasted of defiance. In the crystal city beneath the surface, Minyu received a message from the bridge tunnel. The main fleet was 12 hours away. Admiral was coming. Minyu looked at Elder, at the 12 million waiting in the dying light of their last sanctuary. 12 hours, he said. "We hold for 12 hours. Checked her weapon, a gesture more habit than preparation. They were two humans in a ship designed for scouting, not combat. They had no way to fight the Hollow. But they could buy time. "Well," she said, "I always wanted to do something meaningful with my life." Minyu smiled, ready. "Not even close." They climbed back into the Pathfinder and flew toward the darkness. Above them, the Hollow began to move. Humanity returned the debt, and the universe was never the same. Part 4: The Battle of Borrowed Stars. The fleet emerged from the bridge tunnel like thunder made visible. 300 warships poured into Andromeda, their engines burning bright against the alien stars. Behind them, the last gate collapsed into fragments, cutting off any hope of retreat. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, watching the darkness that spread across the sky. He had seen war before, the border conflicts of the outer colonies, the pirate raids on the trade routes. But this was different. This was not war against an enemy. This was war against oblivion itself. All ships form defensive positions around the planet, he ordered. We protect thee at all costs. Captain relayed the orders, her voice steady despite the fear that knew she felt. Around them, the fleet moved like a living thing, spreading across the void to shield the dying world below. The Hollow responded immediately. They had been waiting, gathering, preparing for the final feast. Now they surged forward, billions of them, a tide of absolute darkness that swallowed the light of distant stars. The first human ship to fall was the destroyer Vigilant. It lasted 14 seconds. The Hollow tore through its shields like paper, draining the life from every soul aboard. Watched the ship go dark, its lights flickering out one by one. They adapt, Doctor said from her station. She had insisted on joining the fleet, arguing that her knowledge might be the key to victory. Now she studied the battle data with desperate intensity. Every time we hit them, they learn. Our weapons are already less effective than they were 30 seconds ago. Then we hit them harder, replied. The fleet unleashed everything it had. Plasma cannons painted the darkness with fire. Missile swarms exploded in cascades of light. Rail guns punched holes through the shadow forms that pressed against the fleet. For a moment, it seemed like humanity might have a chance. Then the Hollow adapted again. Ships began to fall. The carrier Defiance, commanded by Captain No, was surrounded by a dozen shadow forms. Her weapons had stopped working, drained by the darkness. Her shields were failing. Her crew was dying. Made a choice. All hands abandon ship, she broadcast to her crew. Then to the fleet she said something else. They gave us 300 years. I give them 300 seconds. Make it count. She aimed her crippled carrier at the largest concentration of Hollow and pushed the engines to maximum. The explosion lit up the sky, destroying 1,000 shadow forms and creating a gap in the enemy lines. 300 seconds. The fleet used everyone. But it was not enough. For every Hollow destroyed, 2 more emerged from the darkness. The fleet was dying and the shields were failing. In hours, maybe less, everything would be over. Worked frantically at her station, analyzing the data from every engagement. There had to be something, some weakness, some vulnerability. The Hollow could not be invincible. Nothing was invincible. Then she saw it. Admiral, she said, her voice rising with sudden hope, I think I understand. Turn to her, explain. The Hollow feed on life energy, but not all life energy is the same. They produce passive energy. It flows from them naturally like warmth from a fire. That is why the Hollow have hunted them for so long. They are easy prey. And humans. Pulled up the data on her screen. Our energy is different. It is not passive, it is active. We generate it through emotion, through will, through intention. When we are afraid, we produce less. But when we are angry, when we are determined, when we are fighting for something we believe in. She looked at with something like wonder. We burn. Understood immediately. The Hollow cannot consume willing sacrifice. They cannot process energy that is given freely. Exactly, they are peaceful by nature. They do not know how to fight with their whole hearts. But humans, Admiral, we have been fighting since we climbed down from trees. We know how to throw everything we have into a cause. How do we use this? Hesitated. I do not know if it will work, but if the fleet could broadcast a concentrated burst of human will, raw determination, amplified through every ship's communication system, it might create a barrier that the Hollow cannot penetrate. Might. It is a theory, untested. And even if it works, the energy required would be enormous. It would have to come from every person in the fleet, giving everything they have. Looked at the battle raging beyond the viewport. Ships were falling. People were dying. The darkness was closing in. He thought about the who had crossed the universe to save strangers. He thought about the humans who had sat in the cold and darkness so that this fleet could fly. He thought about his grandmother, who had told him stories of kindness and gratitude when he was too young to understand what they meant. He understood now. "Open a channel to the fleet," he said. "All ships, all hands." His voice carried across 300 vessels, reaching every soldier, every pilot, every engineer who had crossed galaxies for a debt they had never personally owed. "This is Admiral," he said. "I am not going to lie to you. We are losing. The Hollow are stronger than we expected, and our weapons are failing. By every measure of military strategy, we should retreat." He paused. "But there is no retreat. The bridge behind us is gone, and even if it were not, I would not order it, because we did not come here to survive. We came here to repay a debt." His voice grew stronger. 300 years ago, they saved our ancestors. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. They simply saw a species in need and chose to help. Today, we have the chance to do the same, not because it is safe, not because we will win, but because it is right. He looked around the bridge at the men and women who had followed him across the universe. The Hollow feed on fear. They consume despair. But there is one thing they cannot take from us: our choice, our will, our determination to stand for something greater than ourselves. So I am asking you now, not as your admiral but as a fellow human being, to give everything you have. Not your lives, not your ships, your will, your defiance, your absolute refusal to let the darkness win. He raised his voice. "We are humanity. We remember who saved us, and we do not abandon our debts." Across the fleet something changed. Could not see it, but he could feel it, a wave of emotion that passed from ship to ship, heart to heart. Fear transformed into fury. Despair became determination. And deep within every human soul, something began to burn. Now said to do it now. Every ship in the fleet activated its communication array. Every speaker, every transmitter, every system capable of projecting energy focused on a single purpose. And through those systems, the will of 50,000 human beings poured into the void. It was not a weapon in any conventional sense. It was raw emotion, concentrated and amplified. It was love and rage and hope and grief, woven together into a single, overwhelming declaration. "We will not let you take them. We will not surrender. We will not go quietly into the dark. We remember and we repay." The Hollow felt it. For the first time in their billion-year existence, they felt something they did not understand. Pain. The wave of human will struck them like fire strikes ice. Shadow forms that had survived plasma cannons and missile strikes recoiled from the sheer force of human defiance. The darkness that had been closing around the fleet began to pull back, retreating from an energy it could not consume. On the bridge of the Remembrance, watched in amazement as the tide of battle turned. Ships that had been surrounded found themselves free. Hollow that had been unstoppable began to hesitate, to falter, to flee. "It is working," whispered. But the Hollow were not defeated. They were billions and humans were only thousands. Even burning with will and defiance, the fleet could not hold forever. Knew what had to happen next. "Form a barrier," he ordered. "Every ship between the Hollow and the planet. We protect thee until our last breath." The fleet moved. 300 warships arranged themselves into a living wall of metal and fire, broadcasting their defiance into the void. Behind them, the shields flickered back to life, strengthened by the wave of human energy. And in the crystal city beneath the surface, Elder watched with tears of light streaming down her face. "They are dying for us," she whispered, "just as we would have died for them." The battle raged on, ships fell, heroes were made, and humanity held the line. But everyone knew the truth. This was not a victory, not yet. It was a delay. The Hollow would adapt, would overcome, would eventually consume everything. Unless something else happened, unless someone found a way to end this forever. In her laboratory aboard the Remembrance worked through the night. She had discovered the Hollow's weakness, But a weakness was not the same as a weapon. She needed something more, something final. And as the stars burned and the darkness pressed in, she began to see the shape of what that weapon might be. It would require sacrifice, the greatest sacrifice in human history. But for the beings who had saved humanity, no price was too high. Humanity returned the debt, and the universe was never the same. Part 5: The Debt Repaid. The final battle lasted 9 days. 9 days of endless fighting, of ships exploding in the void, of brave men and women throwing themselves against an enemy that could not be stopped. 9 days of holding a line that everyone knew would eventually break. Lieutenant Minyu flew 73 sorties during those 9 days. His scout ship was not built for combat, but he had learned to use its speed and agility to distract the Hollow, to draw their attention away from the larger vessels. He flew until his hands bled from gripping the controls. He flew until his vision blurred and his mind screamed for rest. And then he flew again. Sergeant talked him through every mission. Her voice was the constant in his universe, calm, steady, sometimes sarcastic, always present. When he forgot to breathe, she reminded him. When he lost hope, she gave him hers. On the 8th day, his luck ran out. A hollow tendril caught the Pathfinder from behind, draining its power in seconds. Minyu felt the cold wash over him, the terrible emptiness that came when life energy was being pulled away. He heard screaming his name through the failing communications. He saw the darkness closing in. Then there was light. A ship appeared from nowhere, its crystal hull blazing with energy. It drove back the Hollow just long enough for the Pathfinder to crash land on a nearby asteroid. Minyu tumbled from the wreckage, his body broken, his mind fatting. Found him. She had ejected from her station and crossed the void in nothing but an emergency suit, tracking his beacon across miles of dead rock. She reached him with 2 broken arms and a punctured lung, but she reached him. "You are not dying here," she said, dragging him toward the rescue shuttle that was already descending. "Not after everything we have been through." He managed to say, I think I finally believe in something." "Shut up and live," she replied. "You can tell me about it later." On the 9th day, the hollow core entity finally manifested. It had been hiding in the darkness between stars, directing its billions of fragments like a single mind controlling countless fingers. Now it emerged, a void given form, a hunger made visible. It was larger than planets, darker than the space between galaxies. It was the thing that had devoured 100 civilizations, and it had finally decided that humanity was worth its personal attention. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, watching death approach. His ship was crippled, its weapons exhausted, its crew reduced by half. Captain stood beside him, blood running from a gash on her forehead, her uniform torn and scorched. "All remaining ships, concentrate fire on the core entity," ordered. His voice was hoarse from days of shouting commands. The fleet, what remained of it, turned as one. 87 ships from an original 300, all of them damaged, all of them dying. They unleashed everything they had left. The core entity did not even slow down. "It is not enough," said quietly. "No," agreed, "it is not." But Doctor had not been idle during the 9 days of battle. She had worked without sleep, without food, driven by a single purpose. And now, finally, she had the answer. She appeared on the bridge, her face gray with exhaustion but her eyes burning with determination. "I have it," she said, "the weapon that will destroy them." Turn to her, "Tell me." "The Hollow cannot consume willing sacrifice. We proved that. But what we did before was just a broadcast, raw emotion scattered across the void. To destroy the core entity, we need to concentrate that energy into a single point." She held up a device, small, simple, almost unremarkable. "This can channel the combined will of every human in the fleet, not broadcast it but focus it. A weapon forged not from technology but from everything we are. Our memories, our hopes, our gratitude, our defiance. All of it concentrated into a single strike. Looked at the device. What is the cost? His eyes dropped. The person who triggers it will have to be at the center. They will have to channel all that energy through themselves. It will be too much. No one can survive it. The bridge fell silent. Reached for the device. Then I will do it. Sir started. No, said firmly. I have lived my whole life for this moment. My grandmother told me stories about the when I was a child. She made me promise to remember, to repay. He smiled just slightly. This is my repayment. Grabbed his arm. There has to be another way. There is not, and you know it. He looked at her with something like affection. You will take command of the fleet. You will rebuild the bridge tunnel back to the Milky Way. You will take the home. That is an order, Captain. He took the device from his hands. It felt warm, somehow, as if it already contained the hope of everyone who had believed in this mission. Open a channel, he said, one last time. His voice reached every ship in the fleet. It reached the crystal city beneath the surface where they waited. It reached Menu and in the medical bay of a rescue ship. It reached every human being who had crossed galaxies for a debt of kindness. This is Admiral Park, he said. In a moment I am going to ask you for everything. Not your lives, those are your own, but your will, your heart, your belief that what we have done here matters. He paused, looking at the approaching darkness. 300 years ago, strangers saved us. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. They simply saw that we were in need and they chose to help. Today, we return that gift, not because we have to, not because we were asked, but because that is who we are. He activated the device. Give me everything you have. Across 87 ships, 50,000 human beings closed their eyes. They thought of the people they loved. They thought of the homes they had left behind. They thought of the cold, dark months when their colonies had sacrificed so this fleet could fly. They thought of a species they had never met, who had saved their ancestors simply because it was the right thing to do. And they gave. The energy flowed through like a river of fire. He felt every hope, every fear, every moment of courage and sacrifice that had brought humanity to this point. He felt his grandmother's voice, telling him stories in the dark. He felt the weight of 300 years of gratitude, finally finding its purpose. He aimed the device at the core entity. He said, for humanity, for everyone who ever believed that kindness deserves to be repaid. He fired. The light that erupted from that small device was brighter than 1,000 suns. It struck the core entity with the force of 50,000 human souls, all crying out in a single voice. We remember you, we came for you, and we will not let the darkness take you. The core entity screamed. It was a sound that echoed across dimensions, a howl of agony from a being that had never known pain. The combined will of humanity, the species that had fought its way up from caves and conquered the stars through sheer stubbornness, was more than it could process. But something else happened too. In that moment of destruction, the Hollow understood. They perceived for the first time what humanity truly was, not just a species, not just a collection of individuals, but a force of nature, a people who remembered kindness and repaid it no matter the cost, a people who crossed impossible distances for beings they had never met, a people who chose to stand against the darkness because someone once stood for them. The core entity did not simply die. It recognized. In its final moment, it understood that the universe contained something it had never encountered before, a species that refused to let kindness go unanswered. Then it was gone. The darkness shattered. Across the sky, billions of hollow fragments disintegrated, cut off from their guiding consciousness. The eternal night that had threatened them for 10,000 years broke apart like fog before the sun. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Park collapsed. The device fell from his hands, its power spent. Caught him before he hit the ground. "Sir," she whispered, "sir, wake up, please." Opened his eyes just barely. He was dying, they both knew it. The energy had been too much, but he was smiling. "Did it work?" he asked. Looked out the viewport. The darkness was gone. The stars were visible again, clean and bright and beautiful. On the planet below, the shields were stabilizing. The 12 million survivors would live. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "It worked, we won." Smiled wider. "Good, that is good." He closed his eyes. Elder arrived on the Remembrance 3 hours later. She came aboard in a vessel of light, her form brighter than it had been in centuries. She found in the medical bay, sitting beside Spotty. "He is gone?" asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes." The elder moved to stand beside the human captain. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she reached out with a tendril of light and touched his forehead, a gesture of honor realized, a gesture of farewell. "Why?" asked finally. "You owed us nothing. The gift we gave was freely given." Looked at her with eyes red from tears. "That is exactly why we came," she said. "A debt freely given is the only kind worth repaying." Was silent for a long moment. Then her light flickered, that strange gesture that meant so much. "Then we will repay it again," she said. "And so will you. And so will everyone who hears this story. That is the nature of kindness, Captain. It does not end. It only grows." The gate bridge was rebuilt in 6 months. Not just restored, but expanded. A permanent connection between the Milky Way and Andromeda, built with technology and human determination. For the first time in billions of years, the two galaxies were linked. They came to human space as honored guests. They shared their knowledge, their art, their understanding of the universe. Humans shared their stubbornness, their creativity, their absolute refusal to surrender. The two species became partners, then friends, then family. But the story did not stop there. Other species heard what had happened. They heard about the humans who had crossed galaxies to repay an ancient debt. They heard about the who had saved strangers and been saved in return. They heard about kindness that refused to die. And they began to change. Species that had hoarded resources started to share. Civilizations that had waged eternal wars considered peace. Empires that had ignored the suffering of others began to reach out. A new principle spread across the stars, carried by the story of humanity and They called it by many names in many languages, but in the human tongue it was simple. Paying it forward. Minu and settled on after the war. They raised children in the Crystal City, children who spoke both human and who carried two legacies in their hearts. When visitors asked what humanity's greatest weapon was, always gave the same answer. "Memory," she would say. "We remember who helped us, and we make sure they never regret it." On the where humanity had been reborn 300 years ago, they built a new monument. It stood beside the original memorial to but it was different. This one honored not just the beings who had saved humanity, but the humans who had crossed galaxies to return the favor. At its base, a single inscription gleamed in the eternal light. "We remember, we repay, we pass it forward. This is what it means to be human." The universe, vast and ancient and cold, grew a little warmer. And it was never the same again.